entirely sure how to follow that. But thank you, Andy, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation, everybody, to be here today. This is a very, very important conference because, as you know, we're not that far away from the elections in Bangladesh, and so there's a lot to be discussed and a lot of lessons we need to really revisit. But a little bit more about myself. Before I started EU Today, I worked as an advisor to British members of the European Parliament for 10 years. Very interesting job. But going back even further than that, my family for some 250 years have been associated with a part of London, a part of East London, at the centre of which is a little district, since I was a kid, has been known as Banglatown. And just as if you are in Brussels, you will see the street signs in French and in Dutch, in Banglatown you will see the street signs in English, and you've been there. Yes. So, you know, this is a kind of an association, if you like. I also will point out that I know quite a few faces here, and whenever I'm in the press club or if I'm in the European Parliament, as I am quite often, I will very often see members of the community there. And I think that this is actually a testimony to the degree to which you're actually engaging with the EU and its somewhat Leviathan type decision-making machine. So engagement is very, very important. I was asked if I could say a few words about challenges and opportunities, and I thought I'd kind of start with challenges and then get on to the more optimistic aspects. First of all, the partition of India in 1947. There are a lot of historic problems there in South Asia still to be resolved. Think about what's going on in Kashmir. After all these years, we've not resolved these issues. But this is, sometimes it's difficult to escape from history. I want to talk about actually what I see as a major problem for, or an threat, to Bangladesh, and this is actually an environmental issue. Now, you will all know about the problems of the rising water levels. I've been following this for 15 years, maybe more than 15 years I've been following this phenomenon, and it's getting worse, and the rate of the rise is accelerating. At the same time, there are other factors, glacial melt, etc., which I think are, in the next decade, will be causing huge problems for Bangladesh. And these are issues that can only really be dealt with at global level. And this, I feel, is going to create a huge demographic problem. And what do I mean by this? The areas that are under threat are those coastal areas. Now, as you probably are aware, a lot of those coastal areas are very densely populated. And a lot of them are densely populated by people who have probably the least resources in society. And we will be seeing, I would say within 15 years actually, we will be seeing a large displacement of population. What does that mean? I want to put this into perspective, what I mean by the problems of the displacement of population. Bangladesh, in terms of physical size, is virtually identical to the state of Iowa in America. Bangladesh and the state of Iowa are about the same size. In Iowa, there are 3.2 million people. In Bangladesh, there are 169 million people. That is one heck of a displacement. And I think that is something that all of us should really be thinking about. Bangladesh is not the only country that's suffering from environmental disasters at the moment, but I think it is a potential catastrophe in the making. I was asked to talk about threats, so I thought I should say what I thought on this one. But to be more positive, as we heard, Bangladesh was once considered one of the least developed nations in the region, but it's now officially recognised as a middle-income country. It's got a fantastic relationship with the EU. Yes, there are still some of the old problems, you know, and not just Bangladesh, but intolerance. We're seeing a rise of religious fundamentalism and extremism, which worries all of us around the world. We're also seeing, I'm looking at some of the opposition in Bangladesh at the moment, again with one eye on the forthcoming elections. Yes, we know about the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, who are very active actually here in Brussels. and we're starting to hear some propaganda. I'm also somewhat worried about I mentioned Islamic fundamentalism. We are seeing a particular organisation, it's probably best if I don't name, but I've managed to find connections myself over the last few days while I've been looking with the Taliban, with military operations in Afghanistan, and indeed connections in Islamabad. This worries me very much. This worries me very much. But let's focus on the economic growth of Bangladesh, because at the moment this is astonishing. We've been hearing some very positive statistics here. Well, let me run this past you. I've done some research into the GDP growth rate. This is a very important statistic. And what I saw is just astonishing. So GDP in Bangladesh is currently growing by 7% per annum. Compare this with the European Union, 5.39%. Compare it with the UK, 4.1%. Compare it with the USA, 2.6%. And Bangladesh is 7%. This is astonishing. This is really, and this, I would say, I think it's a lot to do with the work ethic in Bangladesh. It's an entrepreneurial spirit that's coming out. It's also, I have to say, excellent leadership of the government at the moment, and particularly the Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. I think that she has done a fabulous job, continues to do, and I know that whilst we admire her for her politics and the achievement, I know that to you she has a very, very special place in your hearts as the daughter of the founder of your nation, Bangabandhu Ramin, and I know that that means a great deal to you. I also wanted to look at achievements of Bangladesh, and to be honest, I printed out a couple of pages. I could have come up with more. One thing which is very, very interesting to me, we know about the problem with the Rohingya people in Myanmar, and given the fact that Bangladesh has a large population of its own to look after on a relatively small territory, almost 1.2 million refugees from Myanmar have been taking shelter and living safely and securely in Bangladesh. This has been a big financial burden actually on Bangladesh. I've looked at the statistics, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that 1.2 million people whose lives were threatened are safe in Bangladesh today. And I think for a nation that has only recently been classified as a middle-income country, this is an incredible achievement. It truly is. The European Union has been very supportive of socio-economic development, particularly in the areas of women's empowerment. You know that this is a very big thing in the EU, well, everywhere. But if you want to impress the EU, it's focusing on those little niche issues that are doing a great deal for your reputation. I noticed in this area that the Prime Minister has received awards from the United Nations, particularly from UNESCO, for achievements in education and sustainable development, labour rights, and freedom of the press as well. One last thing that I would like to point out as a great achievement, and this is one I got a kind of personal interest in. In the last few years, Bangladesh has become a major contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operations. And I managed to find statistics, around about 7,000 of your military personnel have been deployed in 12 countries around the world on peacekeeping missions. Now this is this is shouldering responsibility for a country. Personal note, I was very pleased to note that in Cyprus, in November of 2022, last November, Bangladesh deployed peacekeeping troops on the United Nations peacekeeping force in Cyprus. A little bit over 40 years ago, I was on that line as a young man. We used to call it the Green Line. The names change. To me, it's still the Green Line. But I got a big kick out of seeing when I saw this statistic, that little line there along there's the demilitarized zone with us on one side, the Turks on the other, never any trouble. And I love the fact that there are Bangladeshi guys there now, probably in those same places I was. And I hope that they get as much of a sense of achievement out of this mission. I hope they enjoy it as much as I do, and I hope they all get home safely. The elections. I want to talk about now, because this is really where we're going. This is what we need to be thinking about. Bangladesh has its own independent election commission, and we're assured that the elections will be done in a free and fair manner in accordance with international norms. I did mention opposition. I did mention a particular Islamic organisation. They seem, as far as I can tell, to have been becoming active in this area already. But a lot of it is about spreading disinformation about the country amongst expatriate groups in Europe, and I think this is something that really does need to be addressed, and I think that that's a message that's got to come from your community and from your government. I note that the EU delegation in Bangladesh has been invited to send election observers. Might be one for me and you, Andy.
Yes.
But we don't know yet when the elections are going to be. As far as I can understand, it will be either the end of this year or in the early part of spring of next year. I want to, finally say one thing, and that it's very important for the EU institutions to be engaged with Bangladesh and its government, to get correct stories about what's going on in the elections, not to listen to propaganda from people who throw petrol bombs on public buses, because these people you cannot trust. So I hope that, despite my warnings of environmental issues, which I believe will become a major issue, but as I say, it needs to be a globally dealt with issue, I hope I've been positive. I personally feel very positive about the future of Bangladesh, and certainly its relation with the European Union. And thank you once again for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure always to be with you, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about after the conference. And thank you very much again.